DJ Fat Tony, welcome to Book Club with SHOWstudio.
Thank you.
This book's called I Don't Take Requests. Why don't you take requests as a DJ?
Because it's my art, it's what I do. It's an art form of what I do, and I don't take requests because my job is to read the dance floor and to make people dance. Just because there's one person that wants to hear a certain track, go home and put it on your headphones. I also called the book I Don't Take Requests because I've gone through life never doing what I've been told or asked to do. And I kind of just thought it was quite poignant, the fact that, as a DJ, I don't take requests, but also in life, I've never really, if you ask me to do something, I kind of never did it.
Why did you want that to be people's first impression of you from the cover of the book, that you do things your own way, unapologetic?
Because I think with the book, it's such a journey, and it's like, people already had their preconceptions of what this book was going to be about. They thought it was going to be about a superstar, pop starry DJ lifestyle of all these rich and famous friends flying around the world, partying and also kiss and tell stories. And it was not going to be that. That's too easy to write. Anyone could sit and write, and that would be really boring. And also it'd be pointless. With this book, I wanted people to kind of like, oh wow, it's not what I thought it was going to be. You can't really put this as a book of trauma on the front as a cover, as a title. But so I don't take requests. It kind of just summed up me in general, really.
I think it's definitely don't read a book by its front cover, both in terms of you and the book. But do you think people often get the wrong first impression of you? And was that part of writing this book?
I've always wanted people to have the wrong impression of me. I've never, I struggled all my life with intimacy, so I've never ever wanted anyone to know the real Tony. So therefore, I would be the loudest, I would be the most in your face, in your grill, wanting to fight you person in the room, because I never ever wanted anyone to actually realise that I am such an insecure person. I had so much trauma attached to who I am and where I go. So whatever relationship I had, whether it be a sexual one, whether it be a loving one, or just be a friendship, that relationship would always end up the same. Because as soon as someone got close to me, I would destroy it. And I didn't destroy it intentionally. Subconsciously, I had already started destroying it from the moment they told me they loved me, or they told me they liked me, or they liked what I do. Straight away, this part of my brain would say, what do they want? I've gone through life giving people the wrong impression. I'm a terrible liar throughout life, even before addiction. I would lie about everything because, I wanted my dad to be this big famous person. I wanted my mum to have the best job. I wanted to pretend we lived in a mansion. I wanted all those things that we didn't have. Yeah.
When you were writing this, did you struggle with that temptation to amp stuff up and lie?
You know what, I'd got to that point where I thought, okay, I'm writing a book and it needs to be the most honest thing I've ever done in my life. I truly believe that if I'd done it earlier, it wouldn't be the book it is now, what people thought it was going to be. It's taken this point in my life of recovery and where I am in recovery, and also where I am within myself to get to that point where I can actually be honest.
So why did you decide to write this book? Was it therapeutic? Was it about you mentioned a chance to actually be honest? You know
what, it really was a big chance to be honest. And I kind of, there was more to me than addiction. I wanted people to understand the reasons why. There's many reasons why I ended up an addict. It's not one thing like one life-changing incident. It's in my wiring. My whole family have alcohol issues. So therefore, I didn't stand a chance anyway in that sense. It wasn't like I wasn't writing an autobiography because I thought I was somebody. I was writing an autobiography because I knew it would help somebody.
You grew up in Battersea with your parents and your two brothers, middle child?
Yeah, middle child, yeah.
What was family life? What was family life like? You talk about a lot of chaos.
Yeah, it was pretty chaotic. My mum was married before she met my dad, and so my elder brother's a stepbrother, and he was always in trouble with the police. So the police were always at our door. He was, anything he could possibly do wrong, he did, and so all the attention always went on him. And then suddenly I was there, and there was never any doubt about my sexuality. I knew who I was from a very young age. And I remember my mum always tells me the story, oh yeah, the doctor told me when you were 3 that you were gay, which I always laugh at. I think it's the most funniest thing. You know, oh yeah, the doctor diagnosed me. But you know, it's kind of just like, you know, there was never any of that question. So my dad, I was my dad's first child. You know, the other one was always in trouble. I wasn't the child that he wanted in that sense. You know, I was wearing women's clothes, I was dressing up like my mum's stuff, and you know, and then, so for me to actually be heard, I kind of had to cause my own chaos. And I think that now that I've been diagnosed with ADHD, it says a lot for my behaviours as a child. You know, I used to set fires to the house, I used to do all this stuff that I thought was normal to do. But you know, but it was attention seeking, because I wasn't getting the attention that I felt that I deserved. And it wasn't until I was really young, like about 3, I think, I had a collapsed lung, and I went into hospital, and that kind of was the turning point of so many things in my life, because suddenly I was getting attention because I was sick. And suddenly, oh, hang on, the more sick I am, the more attention I get, the more gifts I get, the more love I get. My dad was this 6'4" plumber, you know. He was never ever against my sexuality or who I was. He wanted the best for me, so he didn't want, we lived on an estate in Battersea. You know, me going out the house in drag at 14, he wasn't against that, but what he was scared of was me getting beaten up or me being attacked he was protecting me in the only way that he knew how. So if someone tried to bully me, my dad would throw me out of the house and make me go and beat them up. Otherwise he would hit us. That was his way, you know.
So you felt accepted at home?
I did feel accepted at home, yeah, very much so.
But you didn't necessarily feel like you got
the
attention?
Yeah, I didn't get the attention that I deserved. My mum always gave me the attention, but you know, there was always so much going on. At a really young age, I met this guy who showed films in youth clubs, and then the abuse started, and that really stole my
youth.
Yeah. I had no choice.
I did want to ask you about this because I thought it really stood out to me that you name everyone in the book, but you name your abuser just by JB, and I wondered why that was.
Because, you know, I changed a lot of names in the book.
Did you?
Yeah. Okay, so Johnny is not really Johnny, who was my boyfriend. He's got another name. And the reason I changed people's names was because I just thought it was more respectful. Regardless of what that guy did to me, and the abuse that he gave me, I have to find it in my heart to a point to forgive. Otherwise that keeps me sick. And I got to that point. You know, it took a long time to me to find compassion for myself. And the moment I found compassion for myself and stopped hating myself or allowing myself to be abused or allowing this I didn't allow anything, you know, but I found that self-compassion, and then once I found that compassion, I could then pass on that compassion, and that no longer has a hold over me. That no longer has that making me want to vomit when I talk about it. It no longer has that shuddering feeling. I won't go to bed tonight dreaming of him, because I've kind of like have compassion in myself. He was a very sick man, and the reason I called him JB were there is his initials. They are his initials. I just didn't want to give him 5 minutes of glory. I didn't want to print his name. I felt that actually at one point we called him the monster when we were writing that chapter, and I just said that makes me feel like that 10-year-old boy again. I don't want to be that 10-year-old boy ever again. So let's not call him the monster. Let's initial him. And I think that worked for me. It does, and it still does. I don't think that he has a right to have his name in print.
Was there an element also of being able to, you know, you were so young, it started when you were 9 years old, if I'm right, of now you're in control of your narrative?
Yeah, a lot to do with that. You know, he's controlled an awful lot in my life. When we were writing it, it got to a point where we had to write how it ended with him, and I couldn't remember. I could not, and I still can't remember. And a year of trauma therapy around it, I still cannot remember what happened, how I got away from him. Because it went on for 4 years. Yeah. You know, I worked for him, he controlled the money that I had, he made me feel that I was worthless, and he made me feel that I had instigated it and I was going to be the one that got in trouble. You know, he told me that everyone would hate me for what had been going on, and all of that stuff. And you know, and I dealt with it in the only way that knew how to deal with it, was by thinking, okay, this is who I am, and what that did do to me at that point in time was it opened the door. It sexualized me at such a young age, and you know, I remember my trauma therapist saying to me, how does a 10-year-old child know to go to a public toilet to look for men for sex? And it was like, I don't know. Yeah. You know, it become human nature. It was almost like I was drawn to it. And, you know, she said, how does a 12-year-old manipulate a man into getting them a watch that they wanted or whatever? And, you know, I couldn't answer those questions because they were survival questions. And I still can't remember what happened to him. I mean, you know, he's obviously, well, we know for a fact he's dead now because we actually looked into it. Because when I told my mum wanted to get him arrested. And I was like, you know what, there's no point in putting everyone through it.
When did you tell your mum?
I was about 36, 37, yeah. And we looked at that point and he had passed away.
You also talk in the book about how you found ways to almost protect yourself, that you forced yourself off a skateboard so that you'd get injured, you put on weight, all these ways of protecting yourself.
I was on crutches for a year and a half.
A year and a half?
A year and a half on crutches, and I didn't even need to be on them. I had an operation on my foot. Like, I didn't need. And it was escaping from him because he couldn't come and get me in hospital, even though he tried. I remember at one point, being in hospital and him coming and asking me to have sex with him in the hospital. I mean, like, you know, when my mum went to get coffee, it was just like, what? And, you know, so for me being on the crutches, I couldn't work. So therefore, I couldn't be with him. And I think that was at the start of the end, of the pushing away. And then from there, I suddenly gained all this weight because it became like a castle. It became a wall. I never wanted anyone else ever to come near me again. I never ever wanted to be wanted in that sense. Do you get what I mean?
Do you think that was a point of almost self-harm, which later became addiction and becoming protection?
100%. You know, that was the start of the self-harm. You know, it really was. It was that point of like, okay, I'm going to become fat. And then, of course, people start calling you names and you get the shame that goes with that. And then, so you change that and suddenly that becomes something else that to be shamed about. And it goes on and on and on.
Is that where the name Fat Tony comes from?
Yes, when the name came. People used to say it behind my back. It'd be like, which Tony? They'd be like, Fat Tony. And I kind of just thought, okay, I'm going to own that name.
So let's talk a bit about when things moved on to drug addiction.
Yeah.
You infamously have said that Freddie Mercury gave you your first line of coke.
That's the worst line I ever came out with. You know, it's like, it was said on a day of filming, and literally just the guy who was filming it said, was like, who gave you your first line? And I was like, you know what? And that was it. It was never like, oh my God, Freddie Mercury gave me my first line of coke. It was a part of a conversation that suddenly became the tagline.
The tagline for
and I spent £1 million on cocaine was the other one. Because they asked me, how much did you roughly spend? And I said, way over $1 million. So suddenly those lines suddenly become like, I'm boasting. It's like, I've got a Ferrari. You know what I mean? That's what it becomes like. And there was never any boasting. They're not accolades. You know, the Freddie Mercury story was a night out. Yeah. You know, I don't blame Freddie or his friends for anything to do with my addiction in any way, shape or form. Because that was the first time I decided I never ever wanted to do it again.
I know you say in the book that you were like, never doing
that again, ever. Yeah, the amount of times I've said that one.
So when did that line between use and abuse begin to blur?
I'd say around the death of my boyfriend. My boyfriend came home to me in 1992 and said to me, I've been diagnosed HIV positive, full-blown AIDS. And I was like, I was in bed in the flat in Old Compton Street, and I was like, what? And I kind of think it was that moment that suddenly the spiraling kind of really took hold. And and the amount of time that I was out and everything I did. I don't think it definitely wasn't a conscious thing. It was definitely a subconscious thing, because I kind of just thought, okay, well, I've not got it, I'm not going to get it, I'm not as stupid as you, and all of that kind of thinking. And then went completely into this whole spiral. And I remember going to get a same-day test a month later to prove a point. I thought, all right, you know, he's going on about this every fucking day to me. You know, he's not dying, he looks great, blah, blah, blah. And I went and got that test, and it came back negative. And I was like, so you didn't get it from me? And, you know, one of those arguments. And in those days, you know, they didn't realise there were different strains. They didn't realise what they were testing for. And this place that I went to probably wasn't even qualified in testing, but for me it was enough. It was enough. So then, of course, from that moment, I just kind of thought, well, I don't have it, I can do what I want. And that's when everything really started to do. So by 95, that's when I lost my house. Started losing things. Up to that point, it was all gain. And it didn't stop till 2007.
Do you think that's because you thought you were indestructible, or because you didn't care?
I think it was a bit of both. I really thought that after that test came back negative, that I was indestructible. You know, what happened to the majority, and I'd say 95% of my peer group at that point in time, all disappeared and all died. You know, from 90 to 95, I lost 95% of my friends. And that's not an exaggeration, that's a fact. And, you know, that has a knock-on effect. That has an effect of where you think, okay, well, I've got everything to live for, I'm gonna just go for it. I'm gonna party like there's no tomorrow, because I could be dead next week. And then suddenly, you know, what happens is it goes from partying becoming reality, and the parties went a long time ago. There was no party about it. It became a way of life. But there was something I always say this, that it's like, you know, my life was shit, right? But it was my shit. And there was something really comfortable in that, you know. You know, I probably was most happiest when I couldn't afford a packet of cigarettes.
Why? Because
I knew that I wouldn't be able to use, and I knew that I could go to sleep. You know, because all I ever thought about was dying. That's all I ever thought about. How easy it would be for me to die and be out of that pain, and I thought about that on a daily basis. It wasn't like, oh, I'd thought about killing myself. You know, I'm probably in the best place, and I can, you know, you kind of see people go, I'm in the best place I've ever been. I am. Mentally, romantically, physically, I'm in one of the best places I've ever been. I'm in a relationship that's the most transparent relationship I've ever been in. I have no secrets. Fucking mental.
How do you feel about death now?
I never want to die.
When you came out of rehab,
yeah.
What was that like when you played your first gig?
It's fucking awful.
But I know that it was you felt like it was an awful set, but in terms of being back in the world with the possibilities of drugs and alcohol around you, that's something which I felt that maybe you didn't go into so much of those, you know, the temptations of drug cravings.
Yeah, because you know what, to put that into a book, it's quite triggering.
Yeah.
And the last thing I wanted this book was to trigger anyone. I wanted it to deter people, not to trigger them.
Yeah.
And I kind of think, you know, those cravings that we get, you know, I can seriously sit here and say, hand on heart, that I'd come to the end of the road of taking drugs. And it takes an awful long to go to the end of the road with it.
As you see in this book.
Yeah, you know that, right? But you know, that was the only life I knew. That was the only life I knew. And I used to like frown at people that did the job that I did sober. And I think, how do they connect with people? How can they play music sober? But I completely forgot the principles of why I became a DJ, because of the love of music. Music's the best drug in the world, and I say it a lot, but it is. DJing again, I had to do it in a completely different way, with different friends, a different circle of people around me, people that actually cared for me and not cared for the job. You know, there's certain people in my life that just cared because of what I did, wanted to be a part of that. And you know, it was about choosing your friends finally and finding your people.
Because your therapist told you don't go and be a DJ again, didn't
they? Well, they said to me at rehab, you can't go back to London, you can't go back to that relationship, and you can't go back to DJing. And it was like, I'm not going back to any of them, I'm going forward to them. And I went forward to that relationship, and it lasted another 3 to 5 years properly before we parted company. And then I went forward to London, I'm still here. And I went forward to DJing, and my career's never been better.
I mean, under the persona of DJ Fat Tony, music is obviously very important to you, and that's why it was part of your path moving forwards past addiction.
Yeah, I mean, what was I going to do? Go back to stealing money out of shops that I worked in? Because that was the only other life, the only other career I had as such. You know, there's, you know, when you come out of rehab, you always think, I'm going to change the world, I'm going to become a counsellor, I'm going to help people. I did that. I went down that route. I started to work with rehabs. I still do. I started to work with people trying to help them get clean, and that's how I stay clean today. I don't have to talk about that stuff publicly because that's how it works for me. You know, by helping someone else helps me immensely. And you know, we kind of think of these new avenues. I always thought I might become a sober drug dealer. That was always a good one.
I loved that paragraph. It made me laugh out loud.
Because it's like, you know, well, it'd be a great one. Because I wouldn't sell any. I wouldn't touch it, would I? You know what I mean? I'd get all the money instead of like using it. Yeah, that never happened.
So when did music start playing a role in your life? What was there music playing at home?
Always. My grandmother, my great-grandmother was a classical pianist, and she taught piano. So whenever we would stay with her, there was always piano being played in the house. My dad had the best stereo ever than anyone else on the estate. It was a case of that. He had the biggest satellite dish while we were at it as well. But you know, it was always the had to have the best. So my dad loved his music. So on a Sunday, we would wake up and we would have Jim Reeves, Roy Orbison, Elvis Presley, and then gradually it would come up to date. You know, I remember my dad playing Sade all the time as well. He was obsessed by Sade. And so we always woke up and we always had music in the house. And my elder brother was obsessed by Lovers Rock and tracks like Janet Kay. So music was always being pumped out on speakers in our house. I remember my little brother had these stacked speakers that you would have at Carnival in his bedroom. And we had these big windows, and my mum and dad would go out, and the speakers would be put outside on the roofs.
Yeah, I remember you saying.
And the whole neighbourhood would like be going mental. And that was how we grew up. You know, music was a really big thing for us. And you know, I remember every bit of money that I got, I would go down to Clapham Junction to the record shop on the hill and buy records, or I would go into Our Price on King's Road and get records. I was obsessed, absolutely obsessed. We would link every song to my own life, which is what we do. That's what music's about. You know, we make up we listen to a song, and we don't listen to the lyrics. We make up our own lyrics. That's about me. Oh my God, I can, you know, and that's the magic of music.
Can you remember what the first record was that you bought yourself?
The first record I got my mum to buy me, which is Elton loves this, was Elton John Crocodile Rock. And my mum used to take it off me and put it in the cupboard because I used to play it and it was la 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 la. And my mum and dad hated it. And they used to keep it in the cupboard, and I'd be like crying, can I have my record, can I have my record? And I remember my mum used to get out of the cupboard and give it to me. And like within 20 minutes it would be put back in the cupboard. My dad'd be like that, like fucking Elton John. And I love telling Elton that story. And then the first record I ever bought was 12-inch copy of Crusaders Street Life. Obsessed by it. Blue cover with the car on it. Absolutely obsessed.
You got your first DJ job when you were working on the door somewhere, and the music was shit, and you said...
Well, the music wasn't shit, I just made that bit up. At the Lyceum. For Rusty Egan and Steve Strange, they did a new night at the Lyceum called The Playground. And I was 16, and I remember going up to Rusty and saying, I'm opening a club the same night as you. And he was like, well, that'd be stupid, wouldn't it? And I was like, no, I'm opening everyone's going to come to it. And he was like, well, why don't you work on our door? And gave me a door job to invite all my friends, my so-called friends that I had. And every week I would it'd be like, great night. And I'd be like, nah, everyone's slagging the music off, they're all leaving. just to say it to him.
Yeah.
I mean, just to wind him up. And he was
So
like,
it
why?
wasn't even in your mind then to get the job?
I never wanted to be a DJ.
Okay.
No, I was quite happy on the door.
So you were just having
I was getting all the attention I wanted off being on the door. I was the door whore of the best club in London. And then Rusty was like, well, if you can do better, why don't you do it? I was like, you know what, I'm going to. And then the following week, I turned up with 4 records. And I played them, both sides. And then within a week of that, I had a residency on a Tuesday night at the WAG Club with Stephen Linnard, who was a fashion designer at the time and he just did very well after St Martin's, and he did this night called Total Fashion Beach, and me and him sat up together, and I was doing DJing at that, and then, that's it. Within 2 months, I was in New York. It's insane.
London feels like a much smaller place than reading the book.
It was 4 streets. That was it, the West End.
Yeah.
That's the magic of the West End. People would come to Soho to go out, and there was that's where all the clubs were: Wardour Street, Dean Street, Frith Street. Everything was in that little area. Then you had, suddenly things started opening up, like Camden Palace, which was in Camden. Do you get what I mean? Which seemed like the other side of the world. And then slowly but surely, so it really was a matter of everybody knowing each other. You had Heaven there and Villiers Street, and then you had Chinatown and Soho, and you had all the illegal drinking clubs, and that was it. London finished at 3 a.m. 3 a.m. at 1 a.m. midweek. That was it. So then everyone went to illegal drinking clubs after that, and that's kind of where subculture kind of like come from. That started attracting the wrong kind of people, which kind of, gave Soho its magic.
How does being a DJ now to then compare in terms of the club scene, and because it's a completely different world, London,
it is a completely different world. And, my career now, I don't really do clubs as such. I do big clubs.
Yeah.
I do big events. That's what I do now. And for me now, it's not about going and being off my nut and having fun, thinking I'm having fun at other people's expense. Now it's about going and making people have fun. Once I get over the anxiety, 3 records, 4 records in, I can go to this whole level where I feel the energy. I used to listen to music and I used to listen to what I played. Now I feel what I do. I feel the energy of the crowd. I thrive off that energy. I give that energy back.
Do you think you used to take your job seriously compared to now?
It was never a job. It was a ways and means to get more. It was never a job. It was never a career. It suddenly, when fame suddenly started coming along with it, and you're finding yourself flying on Concorde and stuff like that. At that point, even then, it wasn't a job. It was a lifestyle. It was like, this is what I do now. Do you know what I mean? It was not like, okay, I need to do this, I need to do that. I wasn't like every other DJ. I didn't have a game plan. Because everyone had a game plan, apart from me. I just had a game. Everything was a game. Everything.
You talk about facilitating kind of other people having a good time. What do you think it takes to be a successful DJ now? What makes you still a successful DJ?
Just never take yourself too seriously. Seriously, the amount of serious idiots that you meet, and you just think, oh God, you're a complete and utter cunt. Do you get what I mean? And everyone else thinks you're a complete and utter cunt, But just love what you do, love music. If you love music and you're not scared of playing something, never be scared, of playing the most cheesiest track.
Do you ever find it uncomfortable being in those club spaces? I mean, you said you don't really do clubs so
I leave.
much anymore. Do you just leave?
The minute I start feeling uncomfortable, that's my alarm telling me I need to go.
What is the feeling of being uncomfortable? What is it?
Just when I'm walking around, people start chatting the same story they've told you 6 times. That's a good one to leave on. Also, the fact that when you're in a space, where everybody's looking for what you've got in your pocket, what everyone else has got in their pocket, it's time to go. I don't need to be there. I don't need to be there. I go, I have a laugh, I do what I do, and I know when to leave. That's a really, really magical magical thing to be able to do.
Have you ever worried since then, oh, maybe this is a dangerous space for me to be in? No.
Because you know what, the clubs and parties and people are not the problem. I'm the problem. I've been in situations where people are chopping out lines and drinking, doing whatever they're doing, and it doesn't appeal to me. It has the opposite effect. I just think, oh my God, I'm so glad I don't do that. Yeah, no, there's never been a moment where I just think, oh, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
There's been lots of moments where I think I can't do this anymore for other reasons, but not because of the drink or drugs. You know, it's a roller coaster.
How did you find that process of almost handing over, you know, not being able to tell people what to think of you, craft it, and actually give all the information over to the public to make up their own minds? Was that scary?
Yeah, I ended up doing a year of trauma therapy around it. It really helped, and it really got me to a point where I was okay with who I am to move forward with this. You know, don't get me wrong, I've had many a sleepless night over some of the stuff in the book, because I kind of would wake up at 2 a.m. and think, okay, your life's really good, why have you put that in the book? They're all gonna hate you. You know, there's stuff in there that I disclose that I've never talked about, and I've never felt the need to talk about with people because it's none of their business. But you know what? When you think that stuff's no one else's business, that's the stuff that you really need to air the majority of the time, because that's the stuff that we harbour, and that's the stuff that keeps us sick, and that's the stuff that holds us back in life. I was shit scared I still am, of being found out. Even though I've written a book and there is nothing anyone can ever find out about me because it's all out there, which is a remarkable thing in itself. But to actually get to that point in your life where you think, I don't have any skeletons.
Do you still feel scared? Does it help you feel more comfortable with yourself
No,
underneath the
I still
bravado?
feel scared. I still feel scared going to work, to jobs. I will, instead of thinking, oh, this is going to be an amazing gig, I will completely, I will like pick it apart bit by bit. I will catastrophize the whole thing. Everyone hates me. I'm only going because they couldn't get anyone else. All of that stuff, that place, and that still happens now. But I have coping mechanisms now that I use to deal with that stuff, which kind of takes away that fear a little bit. But it's still there, and I kind of think in a way, it's also a blessing to have that, because you don't become complacent. And I always, you know, I'm a firm believer that nothing good comes from being comfortable anyway. You know, the more comfortable we get, the more kind of like stuck in our ways and slumpish.
Yeah.
And, you know, and you know.
What are some of those coping mechanisms that you find
So
helpful?
for me, because I work a 12-step program, I hand stuff over. So I'm a big spiritualist when it comes to that. I don't believe in the word, you know, I use the word God quite a bit because we all do in 12-step programs. But, so I will pray, but when I say praying, it's about basically voicing it. It's about me putting it out there. By saying it, makes it real. If I keep it in here, that fear will become so big, it becomes like drinking 20 cans of Red Bull in
isolation.
10 minutes. You know, I will be like completely on edge, you know, the anxiety takes over. So the more I voice this stuff, the less power it has. So I was sitting back in cabs and I will repeat things to myself, I'll say it out loud. I'll ring my boyfriend and say it to him and tell him this is how I'm feeling. And you know, what it does is it just it sucks that power out of it. It no longer has a control over me. Because if I don't voice that stuff, then it gets so painful that I'm ridden with like anxiety, and then I'm like, you know, I'll be DJing to like 2,000 people and I'll see 2 people talking at the back. And of course they're talking about me in my head. They're slagging off the music, you know, and that's where I will focus on that, the negative.
Rather than all the people
Oh my God,
dancing.
you know, exactly. And I think that's got an awful lot to do with being an addict and the way an addict brain works. And, you know, you throw in ADHD and everything else into the mix and it kind of like, it's not fun.
We touched earlier on, you do a lot of work sponsoring addicts, working with charities. Are there ever moments when you're in a club and you see that people are having an issue that you feel like you want to step in?
I remember years ago when I first got clean, I literally turned into I would be St. Tony, as my friends used to call me, and I would go up to people and go, "Oh my God, you really need to slow down." And I still find myself doing it occasionally, but very rarely. I see people and I watch a deterioration in people, and they usually come to me. You know, they know you're clean, they know that you've found a new way of life. The more vocal I am about that stuff, the more open I am for people to come up and talk to me about it. And it usually starts with a, hi, how are you on Instagram? And then it goes into, can I meet you for a coffee? I kind of had a bad weekend. And you know, you meet them, you have a chat with them, and then you don't see them again for 6 or 7 months, and then they'll come back and they go, I tried it different, you know, and that's how it works. You know, I think that it really is about, you know, there is no promotion. You know, I am, by being clean and doing my job and doing it the way I do it, we lead by example.
Yeah. Is that hard to take on other people's trauma? It's a lot to kind of be
no,
reading
because you
on
know
it,
what, I'm not taking it on. What I'm doing is I'm kind of giving them a direction to go in. So I'll say, okay, you need to go here or you need to go there. I can only pass on my own experience. To talk about that, you know, especially when it comes to, like, say, abuse, for instance, the amount of people that have come up to me and go, you know what, that happened to me, and that's where they stop. They don't go, into what happened. They've allowed themselves to tell you that they've been abused. Because for a man or a woman or whatever your sexuality, to actually say those words, I was abused, it takes such courage and strength. It's the same as saying, I'm an addict, I need help. Whew. If someone ever says those words to you, please don't dismiss them, jump on them and say, okay, look, let's do this. I might not be able to help you, but I know someone who can.
Let's talk a bit about working with Michael Hennegan on writing this book and finding the balance between the happy bits, the bad bits.
It was a nightmare.
Okay, so why Michael? How did you know each other?
I'd worked with Michael for many years on parties and stuff, like back when he worked at Sunday Times. And he would always book me for parties. And he was always this ruddish-faced little queen that was really annoying. And there was something I always liked about Mikey. And then, like about 4 years ago, he came to me and was like, I'm writing this piece for 10. They want to do a piece on you about the 90s. And I was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. So he wrote this thing with 10 Men magazine, first of all. And then we did one for 10 about the 80s and the 90s. And then we did so he did quite a few interviews with me on the back of the GQ piece, because Jonathan Heath had done the back page of GQ on me, and Mikey was like, we can do better than that. And then I kind of was like, okay, I really want to write a book. There's something in me that feels that I want to write a book. And Mikey was like, I'd love to do it with you. And I really liked what Mikey had done with 10 Men. I really liked what he'd written. And I just thought, you know what, I get on really well with you, I argue with you, you're fucking annoying, which is what I need. I don't need a yes person on this project. And me and Mikey set off on that project, and 2.5 years of complete and utter hell together. I put him through hell, he put me through hell. You know, there were moments where, oh my God, I sacked him about 10 times. You get what I mean? He'd walked out about 20 times. You know, it was that relationship. And then I went through such a traumatic period of where my relationship after 8 years broke down whilst writing this book. And Mikey had to go through that process with me. And Mikey became the scapegoat for a lot of my emotion. And then Mikey would be doing his own stuff in his own life, which I didn't agree with. And we'd end up bringing in at one point I brought in other people and was like, I need you to rewrite this book. Just like being Tony. It was very real pure Tonyisms. And Mikey saw that, and you know, hand on heart, Mikey did the most incredible job. I couldn't have written it with anyone better.
How did you find opening up to Mikey about a lot of parts of this book?
Really easy.
Yeah?
Because Mikey kind of understood, and he kind of like knew when to shut up, and he knew like he'd go off and he'd come back and he'd write things like jolly. I'd read it, I'm like, hang on, when the fuck did I ever use the word jolly? And he'd be like, I thought that sounded better. I'd be like, get rid of the fucking jolly now. And we'd have these arguments, you know. But that was it, you know, it kind of just worked. And now we're working on the film, and I'm just bringing Mikey in to rewrite the film. Okay, so I'm working with Lawson Films at the moment to do a docu-film with Bailey Walsh, who's amazing, did the ABBA experience and all of that, and known me since I was 15. John Maybury, amazing film director and artist who did the Bacon film and stuff, and he's now clean, and he's going to be working on it as well as directing it. And I'm bringing Mikey in to write it, even though there was this part of me that was like, okay, I don't need Mikey to do this. Of course I need Mikey.
How did the film come about?
Just on the back of the success of the book.
So did they approach you?
Yeah. We had lots of companies approach us.
How did you feel about a film? Were you apprehensive at first? Were you excited by it?
I think if someone was playing me, or it was like that kind of film, I'd be like, no, I don't want to do that. That's just silly. Do you get what I mean? But because it's more of a docu-film where I'm narrating it, and it's going to be all old videos and pop videos and photos brought to life with animation and what you can do today with an old photo, how you can bring it to life, it's going to be amazing. So I'm really excited about it because it's not going to be like a reenactment.
Yeah, no reenactment scenes.
Oh no, and no talking heads. You know what I mean? Oh, I remember Tony when he said, no. So dated. So yeah, I'm really excited about it.
So what's your role in it in terms of how much control you get?
I'm creative director.
Okay.
But you know what? It's about handing it over as well.
Is there a part of you which has to slightly separate yourself from it, even though it's your life and your story, to be able to let people, work on your life and making that into film?
I don't think that's ever going to happen. It's kind of hard. People are going to make their own minds up. People are going to say what they want to say about it, and 99% of it has been amazing. You still get the odd person that was there that thinks that they were there and they weren't. We're writing 3 new chapters for the paperback, which comes out in May.
Okay, exciting.
And the first chapter's called Oh Shit, I Forgot. And that's the chapter that we're putting all the stuff that we kind of didn't put into this book because we weren't allowed to for various reasons, or the publishers thought me telling a story about gonorrhea in my eye wouldn't be appealing, but I think it's very appealing, so we're going to put it in.
So second print, so what's the demand been like? Huge?
They've already gone to reprint it, after, it's kind of mad. It comes out in America.
You've done a lot with media, but was that something about having it as a physical book?
I think that the main reason for it is the fact that I don't have to tell you. You can actually read it for yourself. Yeah. And there's something really magical about that. I've used the word magical quite a lot in this interview, but that's where I'm at in life. And I just think that, it's there. So if anyone wants to know something, they can just go and pick that up or read it or listen to it.
Yeah, you've done the audiobook.
Yeah, in my own voice.
How was that process? I always hear that it's quite actually a difficult thing to do an audiobook.
It's the worst. The first day, I was like, I can't do this anymore. Because there was to read those chapters that I found so hard to write and to talk about, to actually read it in a sense of, okay, with compassion and put how it felt in there. And then to actually try and read it without crying or read it without being self-judgmental is a really hard thing. So what I was doing was racing through it. And they were like, stop, go back, full stops. And I was like, you know what, I realised that I'm 56 and I'd got through life without using a single full stop. It's been one long sentence for 56 years. Do you know what I mean? Literally, not one full stop.
That's what was interesting reading this book, is I've met you before I read it, and it's still you, but it's totally with a full stop in it.
Yeah, right.
How was that process with Michael of getting your tone still in there, but into written word form?
Because he recorded everything.
Okay.
So Mikey sat down and recorded everything. It was never a written thing. So he recorded it because there would be an awful fucking lot of jollies in there if it was him writing it. So, and then when he came to me, and then we did the final read-throughs, which was a really long, drawn-out process of 3 months. And I was like, do we need to say, this coming from me, do we need to say the word cunt there? Should we take cunt out there? We took 36 cunts out of the book because they were just pointlessly being in there. I remember being in Ibiza and on Zoom the day before publication, a week before, 2 weeks before publication, and I remember being on Zoom with all the publishers, and the head of Hodder had a copy of my book, and I was like, oh my God, that's my book. And I hadn't seen it, like the cover or anything. I see, obviously she's done the photos, but I hadn't seen it printed. And I was like, I'm coming back to London tomorrow, can I come and get a copy? And they were like, this is the only copy we've got. And I was like, please? And I remember like sitting there, and she was like, yeah, come and get it. And I've never ever got off a plane so quick, and I was in the cab and I went and got it, and I remember sitting in the back of the cab and I was crying. I'm going to cry now, because it was like the most incredible moment of my life to actually have that in my hands. And I remember opening it, and I'd forgotten who I dedicated it. I knew I dedicated it to my dog, Taylor, to unconditional love, but they changed the words, because I wrote, this book is dedicated to unconditional love and to my dog Taylor, who never judges. And she'd passed away 2 weeks before that. And they changed it to who never judged. And it just broke, I basically want to cry, it broke my heart. Suddenly it was there, and there was no going back. There was no changing it. There was no copy change. There was no like lawyers telling you can't put that in. Do you know what I mean? And getting, you know, it got to that point where, okay, now I'm about to find what real freedom feels like. Because all of the shame that I carried all my life, or all the trauma, or all of the stuff that I blamed or shamed and accused and everything else was in that book, and it's out there. So where it goes from there is was a really weird situation, because I didn't know how it was going to be perceived. I didn't know how people were going to take it. You know, telling stories about being accused of raping a kid, or being this or being that. And all of those things that I gave such power to weren't powerful anymore, because people didn't come up to me and discuss that stuff. They come up to me and tell me how brilliant the book was, instead of saying, oh, you're disgusting, or you did this, or you did that. That went. You know, within your inner circle, you kind of expect everyone to say, oh, your book's really good, or blah, blah, blah. These people are people I've never met. People, you know, it's been read. It was, you know, the second biggest read of the summer, which is what? It's Sunday Times bestseller. What? You know, people. It's really weird. Some people have come like message me on Instagram saying, "Hey, I've read your book. You really are a nasty person." And I'm like, "What chapter are you on?" And then they're like, "Oh, in chapter 3." I'm like, "Carry on reading, please." And then they come back at the end and go, "Oh my God, I really take back what I said." You know. Or other people have gone, oh my God, I'm reading your book, you're hilarious. And I'm like, what chapter are you on?
The response to this book has been incredible. I was reading reviews online just from general public, and they're amazing. And I only found one really negative review, which I thought was interesting because of how much it contrasted to all the rest.
Yeah.
It's by Ian Winwood at The Telegraph, and he said it was boring and damp, which I thought was really interesting when all of the other reviews kind of say the opposite thing. And I wonder what you think when people have criticised this, saying the tone's lost.
You're never going to please everyone.
Yeah.
And the fact that, you know, there's like 700 reviews on Audible, and all of them nearly 5-star. Take your damp, and you're boring.
What kind of people, I mean, we've talked about this a bit, but what kind of people are you seeing really coming up to you in the street and airports?
Just mums, dads, children, you know, like literally, it's remarkable. Normal people are reading that book, and that's the bit that blows my mind, because I'd understand if you were into DJs, or you know, you kind of knew my notorious shit that went on, or you were intrigued by that. I'd understand why you read the book, but it's not. It's people that have never heard of me but now love me.
Did you expect that?
Never in a million years. That's why the last line of the book meant so much, you know, without giving it away, which most people have read it. You know, I finished the book by saying all I ever wanted to be was to be loved, and without crying, because that's it. That's what it was all about. And now I've been honest, and people have shown me, I'm crying, shown me nothing but love. It's a really remarkable thing.
It is remarkable in this book that dishonesty is throughout your life the common theme to search for love, and actually the moment when you get the love that you so desire is through being honest.
It's mind-blowing, it really is. And you know, that is a real lesson to anyone. You know, if you feel it's easier to lie, trust me, it isn't. There's nothing anyone can ever say to me. You know, they can call me damp and call me boring. Right? My book, Damp and Boring. You probably never even read it. Do you know what I mean? I remember when, before the book came out, people were leaving fake reviews. This is like these people that, you know, we all pick up these people along the way that resent us because we no longer have them in our lives, for various reasons. And they were leaving this book is about name dropping. It's like Trump, blah blah. There goes another name. And you know, Waterstones, they left it on Waterstones, they left it on Amazon. And I rang my publisher and said, have you read this review? She was like, the book's not out for review. And I was like, well, we know that, we know where it's come from.
Yeah.
But it just showed the mentality of what people thought it was going to be like. And, you know, the incredible thing is, fuck them, because the book's been a success, which would probably kill them more than anything. You know, kill these people with kindness. You know, their reviews didn't work. Like Damp and Boring didn't work.
Was the book in a way about proving people wrong?
No, it wasn't. It was about proving myself wrong. You know, it's a real book of redemption, and you know, as I say, I can't change what I did, but I can change what I do. And that's the important thing, and you know, there was never a fuck you moment in this book. There was a fuck me moment. Fuck me all the way through it. But you know, it was never a fuck you moment because I wasn't writing that book. It didn't come from that place. It came from a place of, I started the book by saying I had no regrets. I end the book by saying I had so many regrets, and I do. You
also say in the book that success is subjective. How has your view of success changed in writing this book?
You know, success to me is the fact that someone's reading my book. Success is the fact that I can go to bed at night knowing that I've done good today. You know, knowing that I have someone that loves me for me, not for what I can do for them. With
the book published, the paperback coming out and the film, does the idea of having a legacy interest you?
Yeah, it does. It does interest me. It interests me. I'd be a liar to say it didn't, and I can't do that, you know. It does, you know, it's long may she reign. That's what I say.
And what is that legacy?
My legacy is, you know, look, it's about learning to get to a point in your life where you accept change, whether it be good or bad. You know, to stop fighting change. You know, my legacy is like, you know, we have to get to a point in life where we think we have to get it to a point where it's so painful that that's the only point we actually change. Stop and listen and maybe take on a few requests. I've gone from wanting to die to living, and I think that's a legacy in itself.